Hello nerds! Thank you once again for watching Generally Nerdy. This is your week in Nerdom, and on this week's episode we're talking about Taylor Swift's business savvy. We're talking Nintendo is signing contracts to get a proper Super Mario movie made. Doomsday Clock #1 is finally upon us. Batgirl movie news, and so much more. But before we get into all of that, intro sequence.
Generally Nerdy.
All right. This is the part where we do news about the channel, and then we will get into news about the news. So news about the channel tomorrow, or the day that this, the date that is in the title of this episode, the 27th, happens to be my birthday. So this year for my birthday, I'm getting a new camera. It's going to be pretty awesome. I'll do a whole unboxing video for it in Adventures in Photography, and then that'll be the gear breakdown video too. So I've got, I think it's one video to post before I can post that one. It's the Ritz show. Super excited about that. It's spoiler alert. It's a T7i. I don't have all the money in the world, and it's still in the way. It should be here tomorrow, which will be awesome because, like I said, tomorrow is my birthday, or Monday of this week, if you are watching this after I'm recording it, because that's how video works. Anyway, so yeah, that's the news about the channel. Let's jump right into book news. So, we don't usually have much to talk about in the way of fiction as far as literature goes, as far as traditional literature. We usually talk comic books, which is technically literature, but not in the 100% print kind of way. So, this is pretty cool. It was just a thing that caught my eye. There is a new Batman young adult novel coming out. It's called Nightwalker. And it's all about Batman, or not Batman necessarily, Bruce Wayne, who is, from the description, he's 18 years old. He's turning 18 years old, so he's not even Batman yet. So kind of the title's a little bit of a misnomer, but still, I feel like those are years that don't get a whole lot of coverage in other media, so that's why it kind of caught my eye. This one is called, like I said, it's called Nightwalker. It has something to do with creatures called Nightwalkers and an inmate in Arkham Asylum that Bruce kind of attaches to. Her name is Madeline Wallace. So yeah, no, just kind of an interesting thing. It's, like I said, it's young adult fiction, so it's going to be a short one, so probably can read it in a day or two. But Batman fiction is always a cool thing, so definitely going to be keeping my eyes open for that. But that is it for books. We're going to keep on rolling right into comic books. So, this week in comic book news, we Doomsday Clock. Let's just get the giant 1,000-pound pink elephant out of the way. Doomsday Clock #1 has dropped, and spoiler alert if you haven't read it, if you're planning on reading it, definitely pick it up. It's some fantastic writing. It's a beautiful book. It's not quite what we were expecting though. This book #1 is mostly just the Watchmen characters, and we know it's going to be how the Watchmen play into the main universe, because that's what they're doing now. But this was a little bit more Watchmen than at least I expected. So we finally get to see Rorschach, and it's not really Rorschach, which is how they did that. that was the thing that we were all confused about before, because it was like, isn't he dead? He totally got vaporized. I don't understand what's going on. How does a vaporized character come back in the real world? But it is comic book, so it was like, well, they're gonna figure out a way. And they did. It's not really Rorschach. From the art, it looks like the guy under the mask might be black, because the tone of his skin is a little bit different. That's the one thing that he reveals to, I can't remember the other character that he reveals himself to, but Russo, we got a guest. But he reveals himself by removing his glove, and apparently his palm is what shows the character that he's not really Rorschach. And then we find out that Ozymandias, or Ozymandias, however you say it. I always read it Ozymandias. Anyway, we get that he has a tumor, and then eventually we find out he and this new Rorschach are partners. And then like it's all like, wait, what? Every page is like, hold on, what's going on now? And then we get to the end of the book, and it's Clark, it's Superman, is talking to Lois about a nightmare he's had, and apparently he's never had nightmares before, so it's probably some foreshadowing. And then that's the end of the book. So really pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie. It's definitely got me hooked, and we are moving past the Doomsday Clock. We're gonna check out Justice League. So Chinese Justice League is happening. China's Superman will guest star in February's Deathstroke issue, or in a story arc in February with Deathstroke. Slade is being an anti-hero right now. Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke, is being this quasi good guy. And I guess in the story arc that's happening in February, he's gonna start to kind of go back on that. He's backsliding, is what the description of it says. So Superman, the Chinese Superman, is going to guest appear in this story arc. They're now calling him the new Superman, and it's New Superman and Justice League of China. And he's got a really cool logo on his chest. It's the S, but it's done in like a yin yang kind of layout. It's pretty cool. Story starts in issue number 20 with Deathstroke. And that's from the February solicitations, the previews for February. So I haven't been reading Deathstroke, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know, I feel like there's a whole big wave of villains who are now becoming anti-heroes, and I just don't really dig it as much. So that being said, I might pick up a couple of these issues just because I think it's cool, again, that we have alternate versions of superheroes, and that always piques my interest. Moving past that, though, we are talking Marvel now, and Weapon H. If you don't know what Weapon H is, it's the hybrid character of Wolverine and Hulk. So Weapon X meets Hulk, i.e. Weapon H. New Weapon H from Greg Pak and artist Corey Smith. They announced it at New York Comic Con, and oh yeah, the release date, that's what we're talking about. The release date is now March of next year, and will feature the Hulk Wolverine hybrid that we saw in Weapons of Mutant Destruction crossover. Super excited about that. Wolverine is one of mine and many people's, I know, it's a freaking fad. One of my definitely favorite characters, so I am obviously looking forward to that. And Hulk is an interesting conundrum of a character. I've never been able to get into any of his books, though he is a relatively popular character, so it'll be interesting to see the combination of the two. And then our final bit for comic books this week also has to do with Wolverine. We talked last week about the Marvel Infinity issue number 1 has, the teaser at least, has Logan on the cover holding an Infinity Gem. And so I guess leading up to Marvel #1, which launches in February. So leading up to February, Infinity #1, we're going to get some post-credit scenes in comic books. The print side of Marvel is following suit with the movie universe, and we are getting we're getting post-credit scenes in comic books. It's a very strange thing, but there's 4 of them, and they all are explaining where Wolverine is right now, where Logan is right now, and obviously they're not going to give us too much information, but if you read them sequentially and then you pick up Infinity #1, apparently you'll have all of the backstory that you need, according to the release. So the 3 issues are Captain America #697, which comes out on the 3rd of January. The Mighty Thor #703, which comes on the 17th of January. And then Amazing Spider-Man #794, which is on sale on the 24th of January. All of those are going to be the books that you either need to thumb through at your comic book store or pick up from your online distributor, so that you can get those behind the scenes or post-credits scenes, and maybe figure out how Wolverine got out of that adamantium. If it was Mr. Sinister, first day with the new tongue, Mr. Sinister, who got him out of the adamantium, is he gonna be kind of berserker like he usually is when he loses a memory, and so on and so forth. So hopefully all of these things will be answered. I don't really expect them to be, though. I am not holding my breath, at least not until like Infinity #2 or 3. By then, I would imagine we'll know a little bit more about the death of Wolverine to now. So that is the end of comic books. We're gonna keep on rolling, though, and go right into movies. Movie news. So my most favorite bit of movie news this week, I have it down further in the notes, but we're just gonna jump right into that, and then we'll go back and cover all the other stuff, is Batgirl. There has been apparently some rumors that Joss Whedon is not going to be doing Batgirl, although it was announced this week that yes, he absolutely is going to be doing Batgirl. And then we got another little bit of information about Batgirl that Joss Whedon announced that it's going to be based on the 2011 New 52 run. I forget the original author. The female author, I can't remember her name, but it's gonna follow that run where she starts off in a wheelchair and then she gets healed and becomes Batgirl. So that's a really interesting version of Batgirl to go for. I don't know that we're deep enough in Rebirth for people to be rooting for the Rebirth version of Batgirl, although I'm fairly certain, I don't read Batgirl very much, I just, whatever crossovers with Batman. I'm fairly certain that the New 52 and Rebirth Batgirl are basically the same backstory. Killing Joke was canon, so she was in a wheelchair and she was Oracle for a while, and then she healed because in the Bat universe you can heal from a broken spine. And so yeah, so Joss Whedon is still writing and directing Batgirl. Right now we are still in the writing phase, but it's going to take place in the New 52-ish era. So again, very interesting version of Batgirl to go for. Probably one of the more well-known versions, so good on you, Joss. And next, we're moving right into Ant-Man and Wasp. Ant-Man, they as I was filming last week, they wrapped up their filming for the movie. So that means we're into post-production and possible reshoots. So that puts us probably about a year out yet. No guarantees on that. It could be sooner, it could be later, longer. But that's a fair estimate. We're about a year out. I can't remember the announced release date. It's probably the end. No, we're like 6 months out, I think. because it's the end of summer, if I remember correctly. Anyway, finished primary photography on Ant-Man and Wasp. It was announced on the 19th, which was, again, last week. Moving into Dark Phoenix, we got an interesting announcement this week from the Dark Phoenix crew. The announcement was that one of the major characters in the Fox Marvel Universe is going to die in Dark Phoenix. She apparently is going to impale whichever character this is. And the point that it's going to be a major character leads us to believe it is very potentially going to be Xavier, Magneto, Mystique, or Beast. My money's on Mystique for a number of reasons. She has never been I mean, she's got a following, sure, but she's not a big fan favorite. Jennifer Lawrence is trying to not be in that blue makeup anymore, as evidenced by the last movie. The movie focused on her, and she was barely ever blue Mystique. She was always somebody else, or she was incognito Mystique, which is basically just Jennifer Lawrence. So my money's on Mystique, that she's the one who gets impaled because Lawrence is trying to not be Mystique anymore. So yeah, that's that bit. And then X-Men, doodly-doo. I don't know why I have the cast. We've already gone over casting for Dark Phoenix. So yeah, that's the Dark Phoenix bit of news. That gives stakes. So this is why this is important. He's back. Say hi to the camera, buddy. So this is why this is important. This gives this movie stakes. This means that they're taking chances. And as Miss Frizzle always says, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. That's the best way to do anything. So I'm on board. I don't necessarily care which of the major players gets the axe in this movie. I just think it's cool that they're doing that, because then we're going to there's more compelling reason to watch. Then there's more drama. There's more driving factors for whatever the villain is going to be. We're more invested when we lose a major character, as we learned from watching Game of Thrones. So that is going to be that's good news. I'm not going to say that's going to make the movie good, but that's definitely good news. That and I appreciate that they're trying to keep it interesting for us, because the last few movies, save for Days of Future Past, have been very mediocre and very not good. So yeah, that's Dark Phoenix. Next, we're talking about the animated Justice League. So the original voice cast for the TV series, I could have put this in TV, but we're talking movies, they're petitioning, kind of, Warner Brothers to do a reunion movie. My note is... hashtag JL Reunion on the Facebook at Warner Brothers Twitter account, or Facebook, Twitter. Hashtag JL Reunion if you want Warner Brothers to make a reunion movie with the original voice cast. It's so far, Conroy and Susan Eisenberg, who was the voice of Wonder Woman, they have both retweeted people who have hashtagged this. So hit the Twitters and send a message to Warner Brothers account, which I believe is just at Warner Brothers. Again, I take bad notes, so I didn't write that part down. But find the Warner Brothers account, hashtag JL Reunion, and let's get that made, man. Those are all very awesome voice talents, who I got to see all of them do a live reading last year at Denver Comic Con, which I'll try and put a card around here somewhere so you can go watch that. It's pretty awesome. Those guys are fantastic. But yeah, moving on. We've already talked Batgirl. We're moving into Gambit. Lizzy Caplan, the quasi-goth chick from Mean Girls. She was also in Hot Tub Time Machine. She was also in True Blood. She was also in Masters of Sex on Showtime. That Lizzy Caplan. She is announced as being cast as the female protagonist in the new Gambit movie, which is still set to star Channing Tatum. Doodly-doo. We now have a release date also for Gambit, which is February 14th of 2019. So I freaking called it, beginning of 2019. Directed by Gore Verbinski. Doodly-doo. Will begin primary photography in February of 2018. And the wrap date is set for sometime July of 2018. So they're working on a pretty short time frame for a big comic book movie. Yeah, so keeping in the Marvel vein of things, we're going to Captain Marvel, or Marvel. Jude Law has just been announced to be playing Walter Lawson, the original Captain Marvel, in the new Captain Marvel movie with the female Captain Marvel. Feige says that the Skrulls will also play a major role in the plot of Captain Marvel. So look for that one coming out on March 8th of 2019. Still a little ways out. We've got a lot of stuff coming in 2018, though, so we'll be talking about them as they get closer. And then our final bit of movie news this week is Martian Manhunter. So we're switching gears over to DC. CBR reports that the producer of one of the producers anyway, for Justice League, Charles Roven, said that he's very interested in making a Martian Manhunter movie. He said that's one of his favorite characters from the comic books. John Johns, I am a big fan of as well. Definitely think he's a more dynamic character than Superman, especially with the Superman we've had so far in Henry Cavill in the DCEU. Also, to note, Cavill has one more movie on his contract, and I believe Affleck does as well. So, who knows what's going to happen with that. But that is the end of this week's movie news. Next, we're moving right along into video game news. Video game news is a little short one, but it's a good talking point. The second bit that we're going to cover is a good talking point. First bit, I teased it in the intro. Nintendo is working with Universal's animation studio, which is, where is it? Illumination Entertainment, the same company that gave us the Despicable Me movies, including the Minions movie. They are in talks together to make an animated Mario movie. So, yeah. I don't know if anyone watching this remembers, or if you're even old enough to remember, the John Leguizamo movie from the 90s. I think it was like 92, 93. They made a live-action Mario movie that was bizarre, to say the least. Yeah, very, very little to do with, like, they had all the words, and they had, like, this really strange alternate dimension where Bowser was, like, a mob boss, and, yeah, it was very strange. Anyway, before I get lost in that train of thought, hopefully we're going to get a proper Mario animated movie the way it should have been done. Also, animated not like the TV show that happened in the 90s as well. The Super Mario, what was it? Super Mario Super Adventures or something like that. You can look up episodes on YouTube. It was a very interesting show. Partially live action, mostly animated. Very bad 90s programming, but still part of my childhood. So yeah, the other bit of video game news is the EA debacle that's going on right now with the Star Wars Battlefront 2. They have the pay-to-win kind of loot crate stuff where you get... So they have... Alright, I meant to bring this up last week, but a little bit more has developed this week, so we have to talk about it now. So the bit I was going to cover last week is... This seems to be the direction that these AAA titles are going. There is some element of the game that you have to pay to do quickly. You can effectively do the same thing as long as you grind it out and you put in your 1,000 hours, which in the case of Battlefront 2 is a legitimate estimate. In order to get what costs like $10 extra, real world dollars, you can pay, it might have been 20 actually, I think. If you pay $20 for a loot crate, you can unlock a piece of the game that if you didn't want to pay that extra 20 bucks, would take you approximately 1,000 hours to grind out to get that same bit unlocked. For those of you that are playing Injustice, there is a similar scenario going on there. Not quite to the same degree because it does not affect the actual gameplay necessarily. That's a little debatable, but on the whole, it doesn't affect gameplay, especially if you're a competitive player, because any boosts you get from your gear are not active for competitive play. But in Injustice, you have source crystals, and source crystals, legitimately, the only way to get source crystals, there's two ways to get source crystals. You level up either your character or your account. So you level up, and that gives you, per level up, you get like 100 source crystals. And then once you reach level 20 for a character, then that gives you, I think it was 500 source crystals. But to do anything with the source crystals, you need thousands at a time. So in order to get all of the source crystals, you would want to, and what do source crystals do? Let's kind of cover that real quick. Source crystals, like I said, it's not imperative to gameplay, but if you want to change the look of some of your gear, so let's say you have this really awesome mask for Batman, and it's got crap stats, and you've already used your regen tokens to max it out for its level capacity, and it still has crap stats, but you love the way it looks. You can use your source crystals to change it, or to change another maxed out stats that has all of the stats you want. You can change that piece of gear to look like the other one. Also, source crystals are used to unlock different shaders, so the color scheme of your character, and a number of other things that are mostly cosmetic, but still, there are some gear elements that are unlocked with source crystals as well, and like I said, you get very little source crystals in-game. There was an announcement on the last Watchtower stream that that's going to change, but until that happens, the other way to get source crystals is to pay. 50 bucks gets you 150,000 source crystals. And then there's tiers going down from there, but it's annoying. So the new development as far as the Star Wars thing goes, and this isn't specific to Star Wars, this is specific more to AAA titles that are doing this pay-to-win stuff. There is a state representative in Hawaii named Chris Lee is trying to write legislation to take a stand against what he calls the spread of predatory practices in online gaming. So he views it as gambling to a degree, which they're marketing this style of online gambling to kids, which that's what's going to happen. So very interesting. I'm generally not a big fan of government stepping in and regulating my video gaming, regulating most anything for that matter, but video games is kind of a big one, considering in the early aughts we had all of the senators and government types trying to legislate violence in video games and all of these things, and so I don't know, but I do feel like gamers as a whole are really annoyed with this pay-to-win crap. So, very potentially, we are going to see some legislation that gets rid of the pay-to-win. What do you guys think? Let's talk about this in the comments section below. Is it time that the government steps in and gets rid of this pay-to-win? Or is pay-to-win not that big of a deal? You're willing to grind it out, or you're willing to pay. That's definitely, I want to hear what you guys have to say about that, so let's talk about that in the comments. That is the end of video games. We're going to move from video games into music. And this week in music news, we have some interesting stuff. So Charles Manson died. And it was Charles Manson, not Marilyn Manson, as some people on Twitter were assuming that the one and the other were in and of the same person. No, Charles Manson, the mass murderer, died in prison. Marilyn Manson, the musician who took half of his name from Charles Manson, is still alive and well. And when Charles Manson died, some stuff happened. Manson took to Twitter and linked to a song that he did that was a cover of Charles Manson's music called Sick World, I believe. And Paul Stanley from Kiss then took to Twitter following that, saying that Marilyn Manson was never relevant and it's a sad state of affairs, and like I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically Paul Stanley calling Manson worthless or sad because he had to capitalize on the death of a mass murderer. Marilyn Manson's been capitalizing on Charles Manson's name since his inception. I don't know that his death should be any different, A. And B, hello pot, meet kettle. Because I don't remember the last time Paul Stanley was relevant. Marilyn Manson at least is still making quasi-good. Some of it's good, some of it's mediocre. Relevant music. Relevant is also kind of up for debate. But at least Manson's trying to. Paul Stanley is writing on his art, his painting, like visual arts. Paul Stanley paints, and he sells them for ridiculous amounts of money to Kiss fans. And then touring, playing the same old songs he's played for the last 30 years. So, I mean, which one of these is not like the other? One of these two is a legitimate, relevant, quasi-relevant musician. The other one is a freeloading talentless hack who had 3 hit songs in the 70s that he's been playing since the 70s. So yeah, that's just annoying. But the other bit of this has nothing to do with Paul Stanley and Marilyn Manson, but also Charles Manson's death has brought some other very interesting stuff out of the woodwork. We got Darren Malakian, the guitar player from System of a Down, said something, and Scars on Broadway has a new record out, and it uses the swastika in the artwork, and that was really stupid. But Malakian came to, I think it was Instagram, posted a picture saying, sorry to hear about Charles Manson's death. And it's like, oh man, you've done way too many drugs at this point, Darren. I mean, you did way too many drugs by the time you put out Mesmerize and Hypnotize, but man, you've fried your brain at this point. So sad to hear of the death. I mean, I recognize that a lot of artists do things and say things and say that they like things just as a means to elicit a response. That being said, he should have understood that the response he was going to get out of these statements was going to be basically all negative. And then he freaked out and tried to defend his stance on, well, I don't celebrate mass murderers. I do celebrate artists, because Charles Manson was a musician, and I guess he painted a little bit too, and whatever. I feel like the mass murder kind of overshadows all that. That's like saying, oh, I want to buy a Hitler painting because I appreciate his use of light and dark. His Trump Loy is amazing. No, you don't want to buy a Hitler painting because he's a good artist. You want to buy a Hitler painting because it was drawn by one of history's largest freaking crazy men, and you want to scare people. That's the same. It's just like people who listen to ICP. Yes, there are some people who legitimately enjoy the mediocrity that is ICP. But by and large, people who listen to ICP and people who listen to a lot of death metal, I'm painting with broad strokes here. I understand there are definitely exceptions to this. But again, by and large, people who listen to those do it because it's scary, not because it's quality. There is definitely some quality stuff that comes out of the death metal community. Mostly, though, it's just guys playing really fast through scales, and it becomes white noise and puts me to sleep. There's no dynamic to it. There's nothing interesting about it. ICP, they might have. I really can't get past the gimmick with them, but I'm not opposed to saying, yeah, maybe there's one or two songs that they did something original and something well. The little bit of ICP that I have heard, it's talentless and relies entirely on the gimmick. There's no depth to their songwriting. There's no intricate lyrical patterns. Nothing. The fact that they had a beef with Eminem is amazing to me because he is such a fantastic lyricist, and he does have crazy rhyme schemes and lyrical depth, and something that they lack entirely. Anyway, so Melanchian, back to what got us to that tangent. Darren Melanchian said these things, and then somehow Madonna Wayne Gacy, the old keyboard player for Marilyn Manson, his real name, I didn't write down because it's irrelevant, because nobody cares. He starts talking shit about Melanchian and saying Melanchian should die, and then he's said in the past that, like when Marilyn Manson hurt himself last year, said that he hopes Manson suffers, and he hopes that Kurt Cobain and Chester Bennington and whatever, any artist who's killed themselves, he hopes they are burning in hell and blah blah blah. And it's like, it's a sad attempt at a washed up musician trying to become relevant again. Again, he's trying to ride the coattails of Melanchian and Manson and Kurt Cobain, who is still a relevant musician even though he's been dead for 25 years. Just incredible that, and I'm not even, like I said, I didn't write his name down. This one wasn't because I take bad notes. This one was legitimately because nobody cares. We know you because you played for Manson. Aside from that, nobody gives a shit, dude. Yeah, anyway, tangent over. We're gonna move on in music section because I'm annoyed. The next bit, there's another annoying bit, so we're gonna skip it and come back to it. Bjork has put out a new album. This new album is called Utopia, and it is the follow-up to her 2015 album. I cannot pronounce the 2015 album. Volnicura. And I love Bjork. I think Bjork is fantastic. I'm super excited to hear that. I haven't listened to it yet, but from the sounds of it, she's sticking with her crazy song structures that are definitely anything but a typical pop song structure, which is one of the main reasons why I love her. That, and she has a fantastic voice. So yeah, definitely let's listen to Utopia together. And oh yeah, the other reason I wanted to bring this up is because she is collaborating on this album with an artist called Arca, who used to work with Kanye West. So that's a very interesting dichotomy of talent. So this was the other bit that we teased in the intro. Streaming has been a thing that we've talked about in the past, and the future of the music industry, and what does the digital age have to offer the music industry? How is the music industry changing? What does that mean for small artists? This is not a discussion about small artists necessarily, but something I feel like smaller artists can take a cue from and maybe make a couple more bucks. Taylor Swift, and we all know how much I love Taylor Swift's music. That was sarcasm. I hope everybody caught that. So Taylor Swift is obviously the biggest thing right now, because she just put out an album that everybody freaking loves, that's really bland and mediocre, but she sold 2 million units worldwide in her first week of sales. That's full physical albums. That is not anything on the streaming or on iTunes even, because it's not released on streaming services or on iTunes yet. It's a real complicated breakdown, but in the end, this is easily the best way to make as much money possible on your music, because while the hype is big and the buzz is happening for your album, you're releasing the album. You have the physical copies available for people who want to pay the whatever it is for a physical album. I haven't bought a physical album in a long time, like $15 or whatever. And then once the physical copies start to go down in sales, then you release them to the streaming services and to digital downloads, where people are paying $1.50 per song, or paying their service charge. The real quick math for streaming is it would basically take 1,000 plays of an entire album to equal the amount of money an artist makes off of one sell of that same album. So if she's sold 2 million copies, then that's a lot of zeros behind how many streams she would have had to sell, or she would have had to been a part of in order to make that same amount of money. Granted, in the long run, streaming is the best way to do it, because people are going to restream and restream and restream, whereas they only buy the album once. And then also, people who bought the physical album, generally speaking, are too lazy to convert that physical album into a digital copy. So they not only bought it, but they're paying for a streaming service that then sends money to the artist anyway. So you're making money twice on the same music. So it's really quite brilliant. Again, if this was a better album, I would feel a lot better about using Taylor Swift as a clickbait on the title of this video, but it is not a good album, so I am just selling my soul to the devil. Then we have one last bit of music news, and this one is going to be another talking bit, conversation bit. There is a new band that I just saw, and they're putting out an album. The name of the album is Make Them Bleed. This is a metal band that categorizes themselves as horror metal. The name of the band is Terror Universal. Now, it is a four-piece that instrumentally is kind of heavy, but the vocals, the lyrics, they're also really mediocre and not super great and kind of heavy. But they're trying to sell their sound as being horror music, and their look, they look like Slipknot. I know they're very likely fans of Slipknot, and they probably do not like the comparison. Oh, we're trying to do our own thing. Well, if you're using somebody else's gimmick, which arguably Slipknot even kind of did, because Mushroomhead exists, but you're going to draw comparisons to the person whose gimmick you're using. Making that comparison, it doesn't hold up. These guys don't hold water. It was crap. I listened to 2 songs off of this record and stopped. I basically should have stopped after the first one, just because lyrically it was weak. Thematically, there was no like unifying theme to the lyrics. There was very little variation in the instrumentation. It was verse, chorus, heavy part, verse, chorus, outro. Like, it was very, very, very predictable. Metal by numbers. It was Slipknot by way of Five Finger Death Punch. And that brings us to the larger conversation of new bands and why is it that a gimmick gets somebody recognition over talent? That's something that we gotta hash out in those comments down below, because I don't understand it. For my entire time in music, I have never understood why people who have a gimmick and mediocre music win out over somebody who has fantastic music and no gimmick. I don't know. Again, let's talk about that in the description or in the comments down low. That is, though, the end of the music section. We are going to hit our final section, which is TV news. And TV news, just like everything else this week, is going to be a little abbreviated because there wasn't a whole lot of new developments. As far as what we are talking about, let's jump into Fox is doing a new late night show. Their last attempt was the Arsenio Hall show, the revival of the Arsenio Hall show, which made it, I think, through one season, and then they didn't pick it up. This one, though, is going to be hosted by Neil Brennan. For those of you that don't know, Neil Brennan is the co-creator of Chappelle's Show. He was also a writer on a lot of other comedy shows, so he's not new to this. And he's also established himself very well because of Chappelle's Show, because Chappelle's Show was probably the funniest damn thing on television when it was on television. So it sounds like they're gonna try a little bit of everything. They have skits, they have a Man on the Street segment, they have a bunch of stuff that they're gonna just kind of throw a bunch of spaghetti noodles at the wall and see what sticks, and then go with whatever sticks and kind of develop that from there. I don't know. Does the world? I'm handing this one off to you guys too, and then we're gonna move on. Does the world need another late night talk show? Right now, the biggest ones we've got Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, and Conan O'Brien are probably the biggest names right now. And then James Corden and Seth Meyers do the later shows. And then the latest show is Carson Daly. And do we need this? Is this something? Is Fox kind of missing the point? Should they try and do a online show for this format that we know so well? Let's talk about that in the comments down below. And then moving from Fox, we're going into some animation. Harley Quinn is getting an animated series. This show, capitalizing on the astounding popularity of Harley Quinn. I don't understand the draw. The relationship dynamic that she has, the whole reason Harley Quinn exists is because of the Joker, and that relationship dynamic is not something to be celebrated. Harley Quinn, while before she went crazy, she was a doctor, so very smart. As Harley Quinn, not so much. Just baffles me why this character is so popular. But now she's so popular, she's getting her own animated show, and it's being billed as a quote adult action comedy. They are signed on to do 26 episodes for the first season. Margot Robbie is in talks to do the voice, so another mind-numbing choice. The one thing I will say positive about this is the artwork looks very similar to the Venture Brothers, and Venture Brothers is brilliantly done. So if they're taking visual cues from them, maybe they'll take some writing cues from there as well. This is going to be on the DC streaming service, which as of yet has no name. And the other things that are going to be on the streaming service is the Young Justice cartoon that we talked about a couple weeks ago, and the live-action Titans show that we've been keeping tabs on for casting and such. So, as of yet, there is no release date for any of these titles, let alone the streaming service. Yeah, so just dumb things and stuff. And then our final bit for this week's Week in Nerddom is Walking Dead. insert part where I talk about the supplemental information about tonight's airing episode of The Walking Dead right here.
And this is the supplement for this week's Week in Nerddom. So pretty heavy episode. We have King Ezekiel holding himself off from the world. We have, and then Claire talks him back into being, you know, coming out and helping everybody. And then Carl goes and finds that kid that Rick shot at that was basically just trying to feed himself. And we find out he's on his own, or at least he seems to be on his own. Still have the slight inclination that he might be a savior in disguise, but I'm sure we'll find out if that's the case in the next couple episodes. I didn't see who the crossover person was, who the character was that was from the crossover. Maybe it's the kid? Maybe it's one of the junkyard people. Speaking of the junkyard people, they took Rick hostage again. Don't know how he's going to get out of that one. That was pretty intense. Went to go work another deal with them, and didn't work out so well. Although it seems that he was anticipating that this time. So there is that. And then on the hilltop we have Maggie, who brought in the saviors finally. That was an ordeal, and then she had to tell Jesus, hey, by the way, if they don't do what we want them to do, we're just going to kill them because we can't have them alive unless we use them as bartering chips. So, pretty heavy episode. This whole season, like I've said before a number of times, is nice and heavy. But yeah, so that's kind of where we are at with that, and it's great. If you're not watching, watch it. It's a thing you need to watch. And one more real quick side note, and then we'll get you back into this week's Week in Nerddom. I have 2 episodes of Adventures in Photography to post before I get to the gear review, but this camera that I am recording on right now is my new T7i, and then the 3rd episode for Adventures in Photography that is in the can and just needs to be edited is all about the unboxing of this T7i, so that's pretty awesome. Now, before we send you off one more time, GenerallyNerdy.net is the website. We have patreon.com/generallynerdy if you want to help support this. And all the things, definitely, yeah, really, really good episode of Walking Dead this week. Anyway, and now we return you to your regularly scheduled Week in Nerddom.
Aside from the fact that tonight's episode is happening right now as I'm recording, last week's episode 5, is the lowest ratings they've had since season 2. So that's kind of disheartening. What's going on, guys? Oh, and also the priest, I called him Ezekiel, I think, a couple of times in the supplemental last week because I was having a total brain fart. Gabriel. I'm correcting myself now. So yeah, the lowest ratings were on episode 5, and I feel like we're not watching the same show, America, because if this is getting low ratings, then I really don't understand the expectations for your television programming. And then there's one last bit of news for Walking Dead. There's been talks of a crossover event for Fear the Walking Dead and the Walking Dead proper. We've talked about this before. This week, the episode that's airing right now as I record this, we are going to get a teaser. We're going to get information about the character that is going to be part of that crossover. The speculation is that it's going to be young Negan, and I haven't heard any casting announcements or anything like that, so everything is still speculative until you watch, and I watch, this week's episode of The Walking Dead. Whew, and that being said, we have finally come to the end. Remember, guys, The website is generallynerdy.net. The patreon.com/generallynerdy is where you can go to support this. If you are new to this YouTube channel, definitely hit that subscribe button. If you like these videos, hit the like button. If you don't like the videos, hit the unlike button. Whatever, thumbs down me. Let's just get a conversation going. And thank you very, very much for watching. I do have to remind you guys always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.